Hi, I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the January, 14th, 2018 edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Today I was teaching my adult Sunday school class out of Acts chapter 17. This is an episode on the second missionary journey of Paul. Paul has gone to Athens. He has left Timothy and some other of the missionaries back in Berea, and he has proceeded on, apparently alone, to Athens, where he was invited by some philosophers that he met in the marketplace of Athens to attend a meeting that was known as Ares Hill or Mars Hill. You can still see a location known as Mars Hill if you go to Athens today. My husband and I saw it on our honeymoon 18 years ago. Actually, in that period of time, Athens had lost its political and military significance, being a puppet state of Rome, but it still had a lot of influence based on its history of great philosophy, great art, and literature. But as the Bible in Acts 17 tells us, that history had pretty much degenerated into now everybody in Athens just wanted something new, which may have explained why these philosophers, who have been identified as Epicureans and Stoics, neither of whom would have believed in the resurrection or a resurrection of any kind, why they allowed Paul to be heard, simply because he was new. He was the flavor of the month. It's interesting, though, that when he went to speak to them, he looked for a bridge. He looked for something that maybe they had in common that he could work with, build on common ground. In their case, he looked around and he saw all the many temples dedicated to every potential god or goddess in the pantheon. And then he even found temples to someone named the unknown God. Now, I want you to think about that. You know, if you have all these temples to all these gods, and then you even have temples to a god you call the unknown God, what does that tell you about the culture and the people and their philosophy? It tells you that they are hedging their bets. It tells you that they're very uncertain, that they're very fearful of overlooking a God and therefore getting in trouble with him or her. It's sad. It really is. Think about that. To never know in your life whether you'd done enough, whether you had paid attention and met the demands of all these various gods. In fact, you wouldn't even know if you were addressing all of the gods themselves. What a terrible and uncertain way of living. And yet people do it to this very day. People that do not have a firm understanding of Christianity go through their entire life not knowing, am I good enough? They compare themselves to people like Hitler and Mussolini and other people that were villains, and they comfort themselves and say, well, at least I'm not as bad as them. But when you compare yourself, as good as you may think you are, to a holy God, oh, you come up short. It's a frightening thing. As the great Enlightenment preacher Jonathan Edwards said, it is quite a thing to be in the hands of an angry God. And if you do not have a firm understanding of what God expects of you, you will never know a moment's peace, if indeed you're a person of any depth and you think about these things. Why am I here? What does God expect of me? What great news Paul taught that day on Mars Hill to the Athenians. And yet we know that many of them ridiculed him when he started talking about Jesus' resurrection, because it did not comply with some of their thinking. Other people who were very religious, so to speak, and did worship all the different gods, they would have believed in resurrection, one way or the other, to reward or to punishment at the hands of all those gods, and maybe gods they didn't even know. But these more erudite, elitist, you might say, intellectuals, they made fun. And yet they did say, we want to hear more of this later. and yet they dismissed Paul. Did he ever go back? We have no indication that he did, but we do know from Acts 17 that there were some people who were listening, and one was a member of that esteemed body known as Mars Hill. That was actually a group of very wealthy intellectuals who at one time had been true leaders, political leaders of the city, but under Rome had their power greatly diminished. His name was Dionysius, and the early church fathers indicate that he became the first leader of the church of Athens. And there was also, among others, a woman named Damaris who became a Christian. And I know several people who are very close to me who were named after that noble early Christian. I'm J. Lenore Bressler. Visit me on the next edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Have a great day.